Fighting resumes in the early hours of Friday between Israel and Hamas, minutes after the week-long truce expired.
Countries at the COP28 conference in Dubai agree a landmark deal to help poorer and developing nations cope with climate change.
Major oil-producing countries agree to cut output by 2 million barrels a day. Fighting resumes in the early hours of Friday between Israel and Hamas, minutes after the week-long truce expired.
At least 3 people were killed and 4 more were injured after an attack on the Kherson region on Thursday. Russian forces reportedly targeted residential buildings, critical infrastructure, and educational and medical facilities in the assault. This, as a spokesperson for the Bakhmut region, reported that the body of a man was recovered after an overnight attack that damaged a high-rise building. Earlier, 5 others were confirmed dead in the attack and 6 more were injured. A search and rescue operation is currently underway. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president visited a command post close to the front in the eastern Kharkiv region.
Я знаю, що ви втратили і щоденно втрачаєте близьких людей, побратимів. Знаєте, що всі розуміють, що це найвища ціна. Я бажаю вам перемоги, бути міцними, не втрачати ініціативу, захищати Харківщину, захищати Куп'янськ, захищати кожне наше село, кожен квадратний метр нашої землі. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
During the visit, which marks the second day of a countrywide tour, Zelensky awarded medals for defending the peaceful life in Ukraine.
Я думаю, що тоді, власне, для кожного українця не було навіть вибору, виходити чи не виходити. Для кожного свідомого українця ми знали, що ми хочемо, і ми зрозуміли, що наша влада, Янукович, чомусь вирішив нас обдурити. Спочатку він нам казав, що так, в нас буде шлях до євроінтеграції, потім в один момент він підписував якісь нові угоди із Росією, і ми розуміємо, що ми не рухаємося туди, куди ми хочемо.
Для мене це така дуже дивна особиста історія, бо я сам з Луганська, і в перші дні Євромайдану я за співпадінням був в Києві. І я тоді просто вийшов подивитися, що відбувається. І це перший момент, який дуже сильно запам'ятався. Тому що оця невелика група студентів, яка зібралася в першу ніч, на другий, на третій день я просто споглядав, як в день посеред робочого дня виходять люди.
Many people said, you know, I went to bed in Kiev, I woke up in Moscow. And at that point, the protest mushroomed massively. So this was the 1st of December, 2013. And then within hours, I think the next day, you had almost 1 million people on the streets of central Kiev. Buildings were occupied. A permanent tent city was established on Maidan.
It was extremely cold. The protesters burned the tires. It was the war of the ice and the fire. There were firewalls with black smoke, with an effect of a smoke screen. And then, of course, the stun bombs used by the Berkut.
Люди в центрі міста вбиті нашою владою. Ну, це був такий поворотний момент, який викликав обурення ще більше. І в той момент загалом український народ, наскільки по відчуттям, зрозумів, що ні, ми підемо до кінця.
І це, власне, був момент перетворення. Це, власне, оцей дуже довгий рух створення громадянського суспільства, який почався ще на початку 2000-х, він досяг цього першого піку, власне, в лютому 2014 року, коли стало зрозуміло, що ми, люди, громадяни України, громадянське суспільство, дійшли до того моменту, коли ми вже не можемо співіснувати з цим урядом, і потрібно щось змінювати.
Several countries have adopted a landmark agreement at the COP28 conference in Dubai to help poorer and developing nations cope with climate change. A number of governments have already announced their contributions to the Loss and Damage Fund. This includes 92 million euros from both hosts UAE and Germany. The UN described the deal as an essential tool for delivering climate justice to the most vulnerable people, but not everybody agreed.
All the climate vulnerable countries are now also the world's most indebted countries because of having to fund reconstruction and rehabilitation without funding. So don't confuse the pledges you're seeing today as a sign of how big this fund is going to be. This fund needs to be $100 billion a year fund. If we won't get there overnight, that's a lot of money. That's more than half of all of the aid budgets in the entire world.
The fund aims to tackle the costs caused by extreme weather, including damage from floods, drought and heat waves. Talks at the conference are expected to focus on how to stop global warming from exceeding the level of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, after this year was the hottest ever on the planet.
The European car industry is asking policymakers for a comprehensive industrial strategy and a reduction in the pace of new regulations over the next 5 years. They say otherwise the sector will find itself in a tough competitive position globally. The policy recommendations were part of a manifesto and roadmap by the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, unveiled at a press conference in Brussels. The strategy must encompass all steps of the green and digital supply chains, according to the organisation's president, Luca Di Maio, who's also CEO of Renault.
I think we have a big idea. This is the Green Deal. And now we have to operationalize this thing. And we have to define, targets are defined, and we have to also decide on, who does what into this thing, who takes the responsibility based on which rules.
Di Maio is particularly critical of the slow pace at which charging stations for electric vehicles are being established across the European Union. He says that if Europe is to keep up with China, the number of installations need to be increased by a factor of 7 to 10.
That thing cannot go completely on our shoulder. We can't do that alone as an automotive industry, because it's like, like 100 and more than 100 years ago, if, they would have asked us to, to control all the distribution of oil and gas. We didn't, right? So our job is to manufacture product, to develop technology, but we need to cooperation with others to do that.
The association also came out against the heavy regulatory burdens it's facing. Right now, the sector is confronted with 8 to 9 EU regulations coming into force every year until 2030, some of them conflicting. Looking ahead to next year, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association is forecasting a slowdown in new car sales compared to 2023, although the share of electric vehicles will sharply increase.
Major oil-producing countries have agreed on further voluntarily cuts to oil production of more than 2 million barrels a day for the first 3 months of 2024. The expanded cuts are expected to keep crude prices in the same range of $80 to $85 a barrel for the first half of the year. So far, sweeping cutbacks from OPEC Plus and individual member countries since October 2022 have not made the expected lasting changes to oil prices because of concerns about too much crude circulating in a weakening global economy. OPEC Plus, which already controls 40% of world's oil production, will increase its power even further on January the 1st, when Brazil will join the OPEC Plus alliance. This will bring the amount of global production controlled by OPEC Plus to 62%.
A protest by French beekeepers in Paris to demand emergency aid from the government. They say cheap imported honey is killing French honey production. Increased output from beekeepers elsewhere has seen prices drop dramatically, and French beekeepers say they can't compete with cheap Eastern European honey. They're calling for 50 million euros in government aid. Mulled wine, gingerbread and Christmas hits. Normally what do you think of when you imagine Christmas markets? But this year it's Silent Night, after music licensing organisation GEMA changed its billing structure and tariffs increased dramatically.
Es gibt dieses Jahr keine Musik auf dem Weihnachtsmarkt, weil die GEMA eine Preiserhöhung für Weihnachtsmärkte von über 1000% gemacht hat. Und das können wir nicht bezahlen, das können unsere Pächter nicht bezahlen, das wollen unsere Besucher nicht bezahlen.
The atmosphere at the Christmas markets in Berlin was quite different this year and many missed the festive sounds of Christmas hits.
Ich finde auch, also ein bisschen Weihnachtsmusik könnte schon sein. Also es war ja manchmal ein bisschen sehr übermäßig viel oder so, aber so ein bisschen könnte schon sein. Also das wäre schon schöner.
It's Christmas, without song is not really as festive as I would expect.
Some Christmas markets are avoiding music altogether this year, while others roll the dice with complex rules.
Man merkt das. Wenn wir Musik anhätten, dann würden auch Leute tanzen und haben wir auch schon alles gesehen, dass die Leute hier getanzt haben. Ja, und so ist halt, ohne Musik ist nichts mit Tanzen.
Many sellers fear that without music, people won't stay long or spend much money.
The German Christmas market tradition has existed for over 600 years, but due to the pandemic, increased energy prices and rising running costs, it won't be Christmas music that we're hearing this year at the markets, but it'll be the voices of the guests themselves. Liv Stroud for Euronews Berlin.